All right. Palm Sunday. However long you've been going to church, you've heard the story of Palm Sunday. It's one of those stories that's in the liturgical year. It begins Holy Week. And from this point, the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on through his time with his disciples for one last supper, through the times of trial and tribulation in the garden, to the trial before the Sanhedrin and Pilate, the scourging, whipping, and crucifixion, and finally next Sunday, the resurrection. So when Palm Sunday comes, we focus on Jesus coming in and what that meant. And that's part of the story, and that's good. But you know what? There's more to Palm Sunday than just Jesus riding in to Jerusalem. The lectionary text for today ended at that point. But as I have shared a number of times, quite often you have to look a little bit before and a little bit after the story to really understand it. And if you continue on in Matthew's gospel, reading past when Jesus came in on the colt, it goes on to what Jesus did during the rest of that day. And quite frankly, what he did the rest of that day, that Palm Sunday, is much more important than Jesus riding in on the donkey. Jesus rode in on the donkey, everybody's going crazy. Wow, yay, Jesus. But then that died down very quickly. And the first thing that Jesus did when he entered Jerusalem, as any good Jew would do, I have to try to say, there's one for the choir, Phil, to warm up. Is he went to the temple. So he goes to the temple and he sees tables, rows of money changers and of vendors selling doves and lambs and goats. And Jesus walked up and he looked at that. You know what he did? Absolutely nothing. He did absolutely nothing when he walked up and looked at it. Because in fact, that's the way the system worked. If you were going to give your tithe to the temple, you couldn't do it in Roman money. You had to use the Jewish coinage, the coinage of the temple. So it was expected that there would be a place to exchange your money. And he would have walked down and he would have seen these animals that were lined up to be offered as sacrifice, and he would have looked at those animals and pretty much the same thing. Would have thought nothing. Because if you were going to offer a sacrifice at the temple, the animal had to be unblemished, clean, pure, no scratches, no bruises, no broken bones. It had to be pure. Now, if you're traveling, especially in those days when you would have been walking, or you would have been taking a donkey or a horse or a mule or anything, and you have a pure, white, perfect dove that you bought in Bethlehem, and then you go to make your pilgrimage to Jerusalem to offer it, by the time you get to the temple, there's one thing I can guarantee you that you will not have, and that's that pure dove that you left with. Because it's going to be going crazy and bouncing all over the place, and it's going to get cut and scratched and bruised and no longer be useful. So to have these animals available was a part of the cultic system of that time. The priests, the folks that were providing them, were providing a service for those that were coming to the temple. And on first look, Jesus would have said, wow, this is cool. I'm loving this. I'm ready to go worship. And as Jesus is walking by, the money changers, I pick on them all the time because they're up front. It's too easy. So as he's walking by the money changers, he realizes that he hears Elise saying, all right, get your coinage here. Get your coinage to offer your tithe. I will give you two for 18 Roman coins. And Jesus says, wait a minute. What? She says, that's right, stranger. You give me 18 coins, I give you 2 coins. And Jesus says, wait. What happens to the other 16 coins? And she says, it's an upcharge. You know how these banking fees are. Plus I have to give my share to the Romans because you know how I got this prime spot? I bribed the Romans to be able to get here. So now Jesus is walking by and he's saying, okay, this is not good. The service is it's supposed to be a free service. You just exchange so that you can offer your tithe. You're not supposed to be gouging people and making a fortune. So he's a little unhappy. So he goes on and he gets to where the animals are at. And he hears Tom saying, I got your lambs, I got your sheep, I got your doves here. 40 shekels for a dove, 40 shekels for a dove. And Jesus says, pardon me? Outside the city, or even in Bethlehem, I can get them for 3. Yeah, well, they won't be pure here, stranger. 40 shekels, 40 shekels. Why are you offering? Where's the other 37 shekels going? Well, there's that upcharge that we heard about earlier because I had to borrow money from the banker in order to be able to buy the doves. Plus, do you know what I had to do in order to get this prime spot? Had to bribe the Romans. And he bribed the Romans so he could have the prime spot, so that he could get the 40 shekels, so that he could make the 37 shekels, that after he paid out the middleman and the Romans and everything, he probably ended up with 10 or 15, but that's a whole lot more than just the cost of buying the doves. You see, it wasn't that it was happening, that money was being exchanged and that animals were being bought. That didn't aggravate Jesus. It was the greed. It was the taking advantage of people. If they were going to be true to the cult, they had to exchange their money. They had to. And if they wanted to offer a sacrifice, unless you just lived outside the gates, you had to buy from these people. And these people were taking advantage. And when Jesus heard that, that's when the boy went ballistic. And anybody, I defy you to tell me that Jesus was perfect and without sin. Because what did he do when he got aggravated? He threw one holy hissy fit. He started turning tables over. He started ripping open pens and gates so the animals can get out. I love the pictures of Jesus whipping the whip around so that he can chase things. And then in the next picture, you have Jesus in Gethsemane. It's like, the boy was really perturbed, angry. He lost his temper, went ballistic. And all this is happening during the time of Passover. This is the worst time he could have been doing this, because the Romans knew that during Passover, everybody came to Jerusalem that was a Jew. So you've got Roman guards all around the city and all around the tops of the walls waiting for something to happen. And now here you have this crazy man flipping over temples, releasing animals, screaming and yelling about something about den of thieves and you robbers, and just he's nuts. The disciples come and they get him and go, okay, Jesus, okay, come on, go to your happy place. Come on, let's get out of here. We got to, get you safe. And they whisk him away. But the temple leaders weren't stupid. The Romans that were watching weren't stupid. They saw who this dude was. Oh yeah, he's the same one that had the parade coming in. Who does he think he is? We're going to have to keep an eye on him. So they go back and they report to the Sanhedrin. The Roman sentries, the Roman guards go back and report to Pilate, who's in charge. That, brothers and sisters, that action that he took, that moment of a complete loss of composure, that is what doomed Jesus to die. All the preaching that he did out in the wilderness and in Galilee and all those places, I got news for you. There were lots of people doing that. And lots of people that were being proclaimed the Messiah. That wasn't anything different. They came and they went. He's going to die soon, and somebody else will take his place. The Jewish leaders knew it, and the Romans knew it. That wasn't a big deal. The coming in to Jerusalem, the triumphant entry, same thing. You got wannabes and wish they coulds that would do stuff like that all the time, trying to get attention for themselves. Fine, let them have their moment in the sun. Again, they're going to die, and the next week after they're gone, somebody else is going to do it. So just ignore them, they'll go away. Nobody cared. Nobody cared about Jesus and what he was saying. Nobody. But then he had the gall to come into Jerusalem and actually attack the system. Before, when he was just preaching, this was pie in the sky stuff. Great, yeah, okay, Jesus. The kingdom of God's like a big pearl. Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. You just keep talking, because nobody understands what you're saying anyway. Who cares? Well, Palm Sunday, after the triumphal entry, the boy comes and he attacks the system. This is wrong. This is unholy. This is profane. This is an abomination in the eyes of God. This is, oh, wait a minute. This is how the money changes hands. This is how the temple leaders become wealthy. This is how the coffers of Pilate become full, by taking advantage of these people that just come in and give 18 coins for 2. Or pay 40 shekels for a 3-shekel dove. Now Jesus has their attention. The temple leaders, and more importantly, the Romans. Because another bit of news for you maybe, the Jews did not kill Jesus. The Jewish leaders did not kill Jesus. The Romans killed Jesus. And that action that he took in the temple, that affected Rome. That affected the peace of the city of Jerusalem. And the Romans were known for one thing: the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome. Yeah, it wasn't because they were benevolent and compassionate that the peace was there. It was because they were bigger and badder than anybody else. And the last thing they wanted was a group of people getting really rebellious and wired up, especially at Passover during the highest, holiest season for the Jews. And yet here comes Jesus rabble-rousing at exactly the worst time. So he's affecting the status quo as regards to the people and knowing their place. And then he also went on and he affected the finances, the money, the economic machine that perpetuated the Pax Romana. That was it. That moment, that was the gots to go time. That's when plans went in motion. That's when Pilate started thinking, I just need one more excuse, and that guy's gone. And as we go from Palm Sunday through Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday, we hear those excuses. We hear those rationale used. But they didn't just happen in a vacuum. And they didn't start when he was out there roaming the wilderness and the little podunk towns of Galilee. It started on Palm Sunday. So the day of his triumphal entry was quite simply the beginning of his end. So it is good, and we will always be mindful and remember and celebrate that time when Jesus was fully recognized and given that parade into the holy city. But we need to always be mindful of how quickly it turned and how easily people that were shouting the hosannas were shouting the, did you see what this guy was doing? We got to get rid of him. He gots to go. As with any celebration in the Christian year, the liturgical calendar, there is more to each and every day. So as we continue on with our remembrance of Palm Sunday, let us remember that it wasn't all joy and happiness. That Jesus didn't just stay basking in the glory of the adulation of the crowds. Jesus went right from there to do what he felt he needed to do. And make no mistake about it, he was not stupid. He knew what was going to happen. He knew the consequences for his action. But he also knew what he had to do to remain faithful and to fulfill the promises that he made to God. So let us continue to remember this day as we begin our journey from the triumphant entry to the cross to the glory of resurrection. Amen.